Hello everyone and welcome to All Things Watched. In this video we are going to talk about episode 6 of the brand new FX original series, which is available for streaming on the HULU platform, which is of course Shogun, and this is episode 6 of Shogun, which is titled Ladies of the Willow World. And once again, FX does not disappoint, and this series does not disappoint. Another fantastic episode, which I'll say right from the very get-go. Once again, we this time around it's still somewhat of a slower story to some degree, but it does push the plot forward, especially when you get to the end of the episode. But this one did a great job at the world building, the character building, and character development, and then also it gives a lot of backstory to a couple of the characters that are in the show, such as Mariko, and of course Achiba, who is now a big part of the series, or part of the show now, as she seems to be pulling the strings with Ishido. So the episode opens at Azuchi Castle 22 years ago, which is really exciting. It's really cool to see that, and we are introduced here to the young Mariko, and we see her basically being brought to this certain place, and we see how her father, when she was a child, really tried to protect her and really keep her out of, basically keep her out of harm and out of seeing things that, no child should really have to see. But we do learn in this episode that her father seemingly might have been dishonored at some point, or he must have done something that a lot of people frown upon, because they do talk and touch upon her bloodline in this episode, which really makes me think that Mariko is very much an outcast, especially with something that her husband says. Throughout the series, eventually he says it to Toranaga. I've been calling him Taranga the whole time, but it's actually Toranaga, I believe. But anyways, as you can see, here's a young Mariko in the flashback. We also get a really cool, amazing sequence here. We see her training. If you can remember, I believe it was episode 2. If you can remember back to the second episode, she actually picked up a weapon and started to protect Toranaga in the present day, when she's all grown up. And so here you're actually getting to see her go through that training, and it seems like she's very good with her training. She's able to take down her opponent and defeat her opponent, and it seems like she does it with ease. So it's not like she, it didn't really seem like she struggled. She was able to hold her own with absolutely no problem. And then and then of course we sort of fast forward a little bit, and we see her now being given away to be wed. I guess this is when she is actually about to marry Buntaro, I guess so, and whatnot. So the whole episode opens, the whole opening sequence of this episode is really the flashback to Mariko. Now, like I said, we do get some flashbacks to Ochiba as well, but not, I just don't find her as interesting as Mariko. But you can tell that by the end of this episode, it does seem like there's a little bit of history between Ochiba and Toranaga, because it seems like she has a very special kind of hatred towards him, which I would assume will be explained a little later on. They don't really explain much in this episode about that, but you get what I'm saying. There is definitely a history and definitely a feud between her and Toranaga, which seems to be why she's sort of trying to pull Ishido strings and get him to move on Toranaga so quickly, because even Ishido asks her at the end of this episode, what is your hatred towards Toranaga? Why do you hate him so much? But in the meantime, we come back to the present day. Now this is picking up right where the story left off last time, and you see everybody is basically cleaning up and still trying to get everything back in order after the earthquake and whatnot, after the landslide. We also get some very important information in this sequence as well by Kashigi. he basically explains how they lost like thousands of soldiers. I think he said thousand plural, so it's like thousands of soldiers. So now they're kind of like, well, how are they even going to be able to defend themselves against Ishido? Obviously, is no, there is, is no big secret that there's going to be a war. The whole series has been leading towards Ishido trying to basically make a move on Toranaga, and he actually does make a move in this episode, just not directly at Toranaga, but he does do some serious damage in this episode. So we do learn that during this cleanup sequence, when we see the other character, we end up learning that they lost thousands of people in the landslide. Now, in the meantime, you have Buntaro going here to Toranaga. He's telling him, hey, I am truly ashamed. And the idea, I think, here is that he's basically very frustrated with Mariko. Now Toranaga, which of course is his wife, now Toranaga does tack up for Mariko and even says to Ishido, I called him Ishido, but he actually says to Buntaro, he says, hey, she's only doing what she's told. She's only with the Ajin, which really means barbarian. He's still referring to him as barbarian. He tells him, she's only with the barbarian because I ordered her to. So you can tell that he's very jealous, and of course I could see that with the Japanese culture. They seem to be quite strict towards their women and towards their marriages. Loyalty is a big thing, mainly because they run so dearly with the honor system. Everything is about honor, dishonor, and about respect and all that kind of stuff. So I think he really feels like Mariko is just not really, she's not really holding up her end of the marriage. I at least that's the impression I get. He really feels like, that love is gone and whatnot, and so he actually goes to Toranaga about it, and Toranaga is about, well, why don't you just divorce her? And this is, a little bit of a glimpse when he actually says, well, I don't really want to divorce her after the bloodline that she comes from, the shame of her father and whatnot. And so, so right here is the first kind of little glimpse that we get that Mariko is a little bit of an outcast, maybe even somewhat of a black sheep, and it seems like she comes from a family that may have been dishonored, or something went down where she must come from some form of shame or something like that. But anyways, Buntaro ends up leaving, and then of course Blackthorn and Mariko ends up coming to Yoshi, or Toranaga. I oftentimes call him Yoshi, even though most people call him Toranaga. It's just easier for me to remember and say Yoshi. But anyways, they come here, and basically Mariko is doing what she's supposed to be. She's translating between Blackthorn and Yoshi, and really it seems once again that Blackthorn is just trying to leave. He literally tells Toranaga that he wants to go. Toranaga says, no, you're not going, you're staying here. Basically puts his foot down. He's like, hey, we're not going to discuss this anymore. So Blackthorn says, fine, I won't go, but I feel like I can better serve you in a different way. Of course, Toranaga asks, well, how do you think you can serve? And then he basically tells him, Blackthorn tells Toranaga his big plan. He's like, hey, let me sail out in my boat. Let me attack the Portuguese in this certain strategic area, which would basically cut off their supplies, which would essentially affect the entire country and put a big dent into the Portuguese, into their religion, and into the other Japanese clans or families that they're working with. So Toranaga is like, why would I do that? Why would I, send out, friendly fire and attack my own, in my own land, attack my own, why would I attack Japan like that, or against the Portuguese, who are technically supposed to be allies? And Blackthorn basically just says it like it is, and us, the audience, we know that he's telling the truth. The Portuguese are simply only there to make a profit. I absolutely believe that. I do not think that John exaggerated or said anything wrong there. I believe he was absolutely right. And I do believe that the Portuguese are literally only there for the sake of, making their profit. And so, I don't think anyone is oblivious to that. And actually, even Toranaga, the way that he reacts, I don't think he's oblivious to it too. He is a very intelligent man. I think he knows to some degree John is telling the truth. So then we come to a very heartbreaking scene. We see Osaka is on fire, and one of Toranaga's friends who still lives at Osaka, he is able to escape, but he wants to escape and run to warn Yoshi that Ishido has, of course, basically attacked. The idea is that the excuse that Ishido gives is that the young heir to the throne, the very young person who's not yet old enough to lead. Well, the excuse Ishido gives is that his life is in danger, so he's doing all this for the sake of protecting the child. But of course, one of Toranaga's friends ends up escaping to leave to come back and try to, basically leaves to try to come back and basically warn him. And so then we end up coming to a scene here with Ochiba, and Ochiba here is, she's getting ready to go to this, like, sort of, I guess you could say, like, some kind of performance or play or whatnot. And while she's there, she's sort of sitting amongst the crowd with other people that are supposed to be basically, I guess, allies to Ishido. And so, as you can see, some of the clans, as you can read the translation here, it says Ishido was nothing more than Taiki's favorite Kosho, which is kind of funny because she's basically saying, she does say in this conversation, Ishido is good at a lot of things, but he's not great. Basically, is a form of dishonor or disrespect, showing that, Ishido is really not much more than, someone who was, well, like she said, it's just someone who was favored, but he's not great. He's not a warrior. There's nothing really, admirable about him. He does sort of go against the rules a little bit. He sort of, bends the law and everything for the sake of his own benefit. And this is the first time in the whole series, the first episode, where we actually see some of the council members finally, and some of the alliances finally starting to drift apart a little tiny bit. Not to the point where they actually fracture or, give up, but you can see that they are sort of starting to question Ishido, and even question, if what he's doing is necessarily the right thing. But I really like that little sequence. We also get some flashbacks as well of Ochiba a little bit, nothing too crazy and whatnot, but it is very interesting. Here, then we get the scene with Ochiba and Ishido, and once again she is sort of manipulating him, trying to tell him, hey, it's soon going to be time for you to sort of make a move. Toranaga is still here after all this time. He's still a threat, and I think this is actually the scene where he actually asks her, why do you have such a hatred towards Toranaga? And she doesn't really answer him, really. But it is interesting because he's talking about the previous leader, the Taiko, and how great of a man he was, and how they're sort of like trying to live in his shadow. And this is when she sort of manipulates him again a little bit, and she's like, well, if you just took out Toranaga, then everybody would be living in your shadow, basically referring to him, or trying to say to him, you have the opportunity to be a great man. If you take out Toranaga, you will be a great man, so to speak. And then basically saying, everybody would be living in your shadow, then you would have such an amazing legacy, such an amazing story to leave behind, so to speak. And so then we end up going back to where John and Toranaga and everybody is. And of course, the messenger, who's actually Yoshi's friend, finally arrives on horseback, but he ends up falling off. Seems like he's pretty badly beaten and burned and whatnot, even though I don't really remember him actually really going through any battle. I don't remember him actually getting injured, but maybe he's just exhausted, or I don't know. Either way, he ends up showing up, and he shows up by falling off the horse. And of course, John is the one who actually finds him. So John sort of helps him a little bit, and sort of, gets him back to life a little bit, brings him back, gets him, I guess pampered a little bit, or whatever you want to call it. And so he ends up coming in then, the messenger comes in, and if you can remember, he was with Toranaga in the first episode as well, before Toranaga ended up leaving. And so he ends up coming in now and telling Toranaga about everything that's happened, about the assault and the attack on Osaka and everything. And, Toranaga, knows that Ishido is slowly but surely eliminating everybody, and he is soon going to have total control of the council. Like I said, Toranaga is not a fool. He's a very intelligent man. He knows how all these things works, and he's also very good at using the rules and the laws to to his own benefit. So he's able to survive by actually following the rules, which also gives him a little bit of leniency as well. And so Toranaga decides that he wants to give Blackthorn a little bit of a treat, or a gift, so to speak. I think he knows that there's a lot of strife going on between Mariko and her husband Buntara, and so he decides to. Well, he in the previous scene he orders Buntaro to stay away from Mariko for 7 days, and so he ends up ordering Blackthorn to go to the brothel, and I think he's doing this intentionally because he's trying to separate the feelings that that Blackthorn and Mariko might have towards each other. So he tells the husband to stay away from 7 days, and then he orders Blackthorn to go to a brothel on behalf of him. Well, not on behalf of him, but go like as a treat or a gift from him. And of course, he also tells Mariko that she has to go because she has to translate. Once again, he's doing this intentionally. He's forcing her to watch him be with another woman, which, is pretty obvious. So we know that, right? And of course, this is sort of the reason why this episode is called, in this scene here, this is Mariko actually going to the brothel, who apparently is very expensive, is very high quality, so to speak, is very private, very clean and attractive women. It's a very high priced, very high quality brothel and whatnot. And so she tells, the lady here, then of course that, it's for the Ajin, which means barbarian. It's for John, not for Yoshida, or not Yoshida, not for Toranaga. Because at first the lady thinks that it's for Yoshi, but then she explains, Mariko explains to her, no, it's not for Yoshi. It's actually for Blackthorn. And so what's very interesting here is we actually learn, then in the next scene you see here at night, Mariko actually brings John to the brothel then, and she says, I hope you will enjoy your private evening, and whatnot. And this is where we actually learn that the nickname on this brothel is actually nicknamed the Willow World. So that's why this episode is titled Ladies of the Willow World, because apparently these ladies are oftentimes compared to lilies, and I guess that just means that they're beautiful, they're clean, they're very attractive, they're nice, they're smelly, they're very clean. It's like I said, it's a very high profile, very high quality brothel, and it's also very private. Lilies are oftentimes, hid away inside of ponds and stuff where not everybody goes to see and stuff like that. And so that's sort of the reason why it's called Ladies of the Willow World, because the women are oftentimes referred to as flowers, or compared to flowers as being, blossomed and beautiful and smelly and clean and all that kind of stuff. So really cool, interesting, really interesting sequence, I thought, really cool scene. And then we come to this scene, which I thought was very interesting as well. We get back, we go back to Mariko and Toranaga. So she goes to see him again, and I really like this sequence because once again we get a lot of flashback of Mariko's story, and once again it seems like Mariko is just kind of just living out her life and just sort of ready to die, and almost like she wants to die. I think she knows that there's a lot of shame to her name, a lot of shame to her father. I think she knows that her family brings a lot of shame, and she feels the weight of that, with her, and it really makes me feel so bad for Mariko, because I think she's an amazing character, and I think the actor is doing a phenomenal job at bringing that character to life. So I really, my heart kind of goes out for Mariko. I also think that John's heart goes out to Mariko too, not only because is he attracted to her, but in the previous episodes when she was hurt and beat up, and he actually says to her, your husband's brutality is not your fault. And so I think that it's just a lot of things about the husband and about her family. She just has a lot of shame, and she feels like she's worthless, I think, and that it's just really getting to her now. We know we're probably going to be about to go to war. She just had to watch. She thought her husband was dead, and now he's alive. She slept with John, and now she can't. And she just watched John sleep with, she brought John to somewhere to sleep with other people. So I think emotionally right now, Mariko is just going through such an emotional roller coaster that I think that she's really struggling right now. And so Toranaga really helps her here, I think, with, while we see the flashbacks, and he says to her, your war isn't over. And he actually says to her that her father only married her off to Buntaro to try to keep her away from the cruelty and to keep her away from shame and to try to give her a life that he probably himself could not offer. And he says to her, he didn't try to take her away from the war. He married her off in hopes that one day she would come back and, and keep fighting for her family name and keep fighting for her legacy and keep fighting for, for him, really. And this is why he says here, your war isn't over. And I just thought it was such a beautiful little sequence, beautiful little scene here between him and Mariko, and I thought it was very appropriate and very necessary. This episode did a great job at giving us a lot of backstory between mainly Mariko, but we do get a little bit of Ochiba as well, but mainly Mariko. We get a lot of backstory from her. And I really appreciated it. I really like how the show takes its time and allows you to marinate in the story, and the dialogue is phenomenal as well. The writing is just almost really perfect, if you ask me. And so then we come back now to the council. Of course, we know that Ishido ended up inviting, I believe it was an actor or something, or one of the performers or whatever. He's like, hey, you can be a part of the council as long as you vote to have Toranaga killed or whatnot. So he's just trying to speed up that whole process and get the war against Toranaga started. But here, like I said, the council now is starting to have a little bit of strife because not all the leaders are any longer, they're no longer going along with him, and a couple of the leaders here actually say, you're a disgrace. They don't say you're a disgrace. They say that you're dishonoring the Taiko, the last heir. By doing all this, you're really, dishonoring the regents and everything, the council and the whole reason why all this was set up, and they basically are starting to turn against him. Of course, as always, Ochiba is here, looming in the background, pulling all the strings of Ishido, and she says, hey, but it was Toranaga all along who planned all this. He knew that this was going to happen and whatnot, and she basically calls him out and basically tells Ishido that the time to act is now. There's no, the time of being a politician is over. It's time to move on and time to take action, and that is exactly what happens. Ishido ends up going to this leader or this council member who ends up basically turning against him, and he actually slaughters the entire crew. As you can see, he's here facing them, and he kills them all with no mercy, but of course he doesn't take any of the credit. He says they were slaughtered by a bunch of bandits or something stupid like that while they're out running and moving. And of course, actually you can see it in the very next slide here. You can see Toranaga gets the news saying that that other leader was killed by bandits while trying to leave Osaka, which we all know, including Toranaga. Toranaga also knows that this is not true. He's not an idiot, and so of course he overlooks the people. As you can see, Mariko and Blackthorn and everyone, you can see Toranaga is talking, and he says, and war will be declared on my clan, which is exactly what we've been saying the whole time. Toranaga knows this, we know this, Ishido knows this, we're not all idiots, we all know how this is going to go down. And Toranaga literally just says exactly what we're thinking. He's going to get the blame for it. He's going to end up being declared the traitor. He'll be impeached falsely, and then of course there will be a war declared on him, and which I'm not surprised about anyways, because just after what his son did in the previous episode, I'm surprised that it would take this whole thing with the bandits. I just assumed they would have said that anyways. And then we get to the very last scene here, of course, which is Yoshi saying that Crimson Sky it will be. Now, for anyone who watched the episode, you'll know what that means. For anyone that didn't watch the episode, I'll just give you a very quick briefing as to what Crimson Sky means. Or if you don't remember, Crimson Sky simply means a straight head-on full assault on Osaka City, where they just go in head on. They literally go right in through the front door, and they slaughter, and they go in intentionally with trying to kill the political leaders, which means they would destroy everybody on the council, kill all the council, and then try and recreate their own government, but this time a government that runs fairly, that honors the rules and whatnot. It's kind of like a civil war, basically. It's just like when the government no longer works for the people, or no longer, when the people are suffering because of of these like Ishido and the council, then it's time to overpower the council and enforce a new council that will do right by the people and by the council and by the rules, by the honor and all that kind of stuff, by the code and all that good stuff. And that's essentially what Crimson Sky means. It just simply means a full head-on assault on Osaka City where they aim for the political leaders. And so Toranaga says, okay, enough is enough. It's time for us to go full blast with Crimson Sky. Now, to my knowledge, I think that the second last episode, I didn't see it yet, but I believe that the second last episode of the series is actually titled Crimson Sky. So, like I said, the whole series was building towards this war. We did get some glimpses of action, especially early on. The first, I think in episode 2, we had a little bit of action sprinkled throughout the series, but not really a whole, I wouldn't say that this is a straight up action series. I would say it's more of like a drama, I would say it's really just a drama, I think, first and foremost, with little sprinkles of action. But I do hope that, as we get closer to the finale, especially now with Crimson Sky, I hope it becomes just straight up action, pedal to the metal. I can't wait to see this war go down. We know the war is coming. We know it's going to go down, and I just can't wait to see how it's going to happen. Once again, Toranaga is super intelligent. He's a very smart man. He knows the way of war. He's been in wars. Or at least I would assume he was. He's smart enough where I think he knows the political game, but I feel like he also is a good enough fighter as well. A swordsman or samurai, whatever you want to call him, whatever he is, I guess, officially. I have no doubts in my mind that with his intelligence and with the training, and also now let's not forget that John Blackthorne has been training as well, training them to use the cannons. So I have no doubts in my mind that all that will come into effect with Crimson Sky. I am still convinced eventually it might not be this episode, but I do think that before, or maybe even at the finale, whenever this war is about to begin, I do feel like he's going to let John potentially take his boat back and use his own tactics. I think he will I don't think he's going to release John. I think John will have to fight in the war, but I do think that he'll give him the freedom to fight in whatever way he wants, if that makes sense. So I don't think he'll release him. I just think that he'll give him freedom to fight in whatever way he deems to be necessary. And so all in all, I absolutely love this episode. Once again, it was really cool to see that much backstory on Mariko and on a couple of the characters. Really, it was really nice to see the foundation, where they come from. It was really nice to see now that we're finally moving forward with the story in terms of Crimson Sky. It was really cool, too, that we learned that a lot of, and also let's not forget that from that landslide, we also learned, that he lost thousands and thousands of people, which means that Crimson Sky is probably the only option he even has. He doesn't have a big enough army now to be able to defend the land. He doesn't have a big enough army to defend his people, most likely, I mean. So maybe Crimson Sky is the only option. What better way to, sort of put up your fight than to just simply go with whatever fighters you have remaining, go knock on the front door and just go full blown. Oh, and also I think it's worth mentioning as well, we also did learn that he is going to recruit some help from his brother. So that might be a little bit of a boost in his army. Probably won't replace all of his army, but it should be a little bit of a bump, and that should give him a few extra soldiers and another alliance, which will help him in Operation Crimson Sky. And with that being said, folks, that's my review of episode 6. Absolutely loved it. Can't wait to see where the story goes from here. This was just a phenomenal show, a phenomenal episode with some amazing world building, character development, and backstory, and I cannot wait to see Crimson Sky in full action. Cannot wait to see where the story goes to next. So let me know in the comment section below, folks, if you've seen this episode, and if you liked it, tell me why or why not. If you like this video, click that subscribe button, and until the next one, take care.